although we've been catering for the youngsters, this also applies to the adults as well, the fear of public speaking. And as Professor Ahmed will, I'm sure he will elaborate on that, this is one of the biggest fears that anybody can face. So we're very blessed to have our guest speakers here today with us, who are going to share their experiences and give us advice and tips on how to overcome this fear. So I think without further ado, because we have two speakers, Professor Waqar Ahmed, who is a professor of nanoscience and nanotechnology at the University of Lincoln, he will be starting off first, and he will be presenting. He will have some visuals, and then after that, Rona Barbour is going to take over, and she's going to speak about the same topic, giving more advice from her experiences. And then at the end, we'll have some time for people to ask questions, and we'll have a discussion. So I think we'll end up like this with the question Q&A. So I think at this point, I'm just going to, so the rules are that if people can mute your mics for now, so we'll listen to Professor Ahmed, and then we'll listen to Rona. And then when we say, if you have any questions, either you need to raise your hands electronically, or you could just put your hand up and at the end, and then you'll be asked, and you can unmute and ask the question. Alternatively, you can type in the chat box if you've got any question, and all the questions will be answered. So I'm just going to pass over to Professor Waqar Ahmed now.
Okay, thank you for attending this webinar. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Basically, let me just tell you a little bit of my history. I did my PhD at the University of Salford, and then I went to work in industry. And a lot of it was in technical roles as a research scientist, and then later I got some management roles. And then I decided that I wanted to get into academia. And I got a lectureship at Manchester Metropolitan University, and I worked my way up from being a lecturer to a senior lecturer to a principal lecturer to a reader and professor, then head of the Institute of Nanotechnology and Bioengineering at the University of Central Lancashire for 6 years. Currently, I'm at the University of Lincoln as Deputy Head of School for Mathematics and Physics, and also Deputy Director of Research for the whole College of Science, which includes the School of Medicine, Pharmacy, Chemistry, Maths and Physics, Engineering. So there's 10 different schools within the College of Science. So that's my current role. And what I've always found out that in addition to my technical qualifications, which is absolutely essential in any field, there's two fundamental skills that I think has helped me to progress in my career. And if I learned them earlier on, as a youngster, I would have progressed even faster. So the first skill was the skill of writing effectively and clearly and getting my point across in a clear, articulate manner without waffling and rambling. And secondly, the ability to communicate to multiple people or public speaking. And I've always had a fear of that, and I'll go into my fear of public speaking later on. But if you can master these two skills and also how to get on with people, you can progress in your career. So you need to be able to communicate in writing and verbally in order to progress. After all, you're going to be working with other human beings. And if you can't communicate well, it's very difficult to progress, even if you're technically brilliant at your job. So these are the two fundamental skills that I think you need to add on to a degree or a PhD in medicine, pharmacy, dentistry, whatever. If you got these skills, I think you can progress much faster. So let me share my slides with you now to go into the topic. Can you see my slides?
Not yet.
Share green.
In the meantime, maybe Rona wants to say something about her background and her career. Is it sharing my slides now?
Oh, we're going to the slides now. Okay.
Yep.
No, I mean, you go on. Yeah, I'm going to put my slides on the screen so I know what I'm speaking about. will you go ahead and please, tell the audience about your experience of public speaking and your background?
I'd rather do that on the screen, actually. I can't, I've just got a big, I don't know what's coming here with the screen. Where are
What
we?
are you sharing on the screen?
Yeah, if you stop sharing the screen, then we can see the bigger screen, please. Professor
So I
Waqar?
stop sharing.
Yes.
Um,
No, still you're sharing.
sharing,
Yeah, now it's back.
I'm not sharing.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Well, afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining this webinar. I'm sure you will find it interesting and hopefully inspiring. One of the worst fears that anybody can ever try to overcome is the fear of speaking in public, because it doesn't just apply to a work situation. It applies in life in general, whether or not you're able to speak up for yourself. And I failed to understand this for a very long time because I had a very unusual upbringing in that I was born one of 8 children to registered blind parents. And my upbringing was so different from anybody else's, but I never knew that. You don't know these things until you're much older and almost an adult practically. But my father taught us because he hadn't had a formal education in mainstream. And he was determined that we would all be very well educated because we were born in a very poor area in Glasgow City, and he wanted us out of there. And I think that the way we were taught was so unusual that by the time I was 5, I could have stood up and done a public speech, quite frankly. When there was visitors to the house or we had any parties going on or anything, none of us were shy or retiring in any way, shape or form. And it wasn't that we were overconfident, it was that we just did not understand the fear of public speaking. Because where that usually comes from is something has happened when you were a child or a young adult, a teenager as well. It's a very common time for that to happen. When somebody has put you down and that's it. For the rest of your life, you're terrified to open your mouth and speak in front of people because you think you're being judged, and all sorts of reasons behind it. But basically, we need to understand the fear of public speaking if we're going to overcome it. We need to understand where it came from. So there's 5, but there's really 3 reasons that are the more important. One is understand that that's what it is that's stopping you, is that you have a fear of public speaking. Because sometimes it's just shyness. People often confuse confidence with shyness, and it's not always because you're afraid to speak. It's just that you're shy and don't want to put yourself in the public eye. So that's the first thing we would have to do, is separate those 2 things. Is it a real fear, or is it just a confidence issue? Because the 2 are so different. A real fear is a phobia. And that's much, much more difficult to overcome. Whereas shyness, you can overcome that practically in the click of a finger. So I have a little program that I go through with people who have a fear of public speaking. And Dr. Nasser knows this very, very well because I've used it so many times and it's very, very effective. I don't think I've ever had anybody who didn't manage to overcome their fear, and hopefully I never will. So if you can see what Professor Ahmed has to show you on the slides, and then if you want to ask any questions after that, I'll happily tell you. But first of all, let me just give you a little insight into what my childhood was and why it was so different. I forgot to mention this to you. Before my father went to work in the daytime, from the age of about 4, he would say to me, I'm going to give you a new word today, and when I come home, I want you to be able to tell me what it means, be able to spell it, and use it in its proper context in a sentence. Now, this wasn't forced in any way, it was a game. And we enjoyed doing that. And if we got it right first time, we got a bar of sugar. So by the time I was about 7 or 8 years old, I was a talking dictionary. It was absolutely incredible, the language skills that I had for a child. And I've seen this go through my whole family. And now my own children and my grandchildren all have the same skills, thankfully, because let's not confuse this. That's what it is. It's just skill. It takes practice. It's not magic. It's not somebody's born with a superhuman brain that helps them to communicate better than anybody else. It's learned behaviour. And that is a big, big plus. If you've learned how to speak effectively when you were younger, it will be with you all of your life. And see, once you do overcome that fear, it never comes back. So I'll look forward to seeing Professor Ahmed's slides, and then we'll take some questions and answers at that point as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rona. Thank you. Let me just get back to my slides. Can you see my slides now?
I can see the first page, yeah.
Slideshow.
Can you see them now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so this topic is how to overcome the fear of public speaking. Now, let me just ask you, how do you feel about public speaking? Let me just ask the delegates. Are you confident in speaking in public, or are you fearful of public speaking?
I think most people who have joined us today for this webinar they do have a fear of public speaking. That's why they're here.
Okay. So, and like Rona says before, it's one of the most commonest fear that you can come across. So either you feel cool and confident, or you're fearful and stressful, yeah? And a lot of people are fearful and stressful. So I found this little study on the internet, and basically if you look at the, like Rona says before, if you look at the top 10 phobias that people have got when they did the questionnaire, public speaking, 74% of the US population were scared of public speaking, which is a massive number. And only 68% were scared of fear of death. And then you got fear of spiders and darkness and heights. So in many surveys, public speaking comes as either number one or number two of the fears that people have. Now, you might ask, how can you have that much of a phobia for public speaking that is worse than dying? I don't know, Rona, if you come across people with that kind of phobias in public speaking.
Yes, I have actually. I've come across people who were so scared, as I said earlier to yourself and to Dr. Ali. I've known people who've come into a seminar that I've been running, and when it's been their turn to stand up and speak, and they knew beforehand that they were going to to be asked to stand up and speak, one lad fainted. He just completely keeled over. He was so afraid of opening his mouth and speaking in a room where there were a lot of other people whose eyes were on him. He just passed out.
Yeah.
I'd like to tell you that young man became a very good public speaker, but it took a little while to get him going initially. But he did become a very good public speaker.
So I also had a big phobia for public speaking, but I'll tell you my story a little later on. But at the risk of embarrassing Nasser, I'll tell you his story, yeah? And basically, Nasser did his PhD with me at Manchester Metropolitan University, and there was a speaking competition for presenting your research in the department. So I said to him, Nasser, you're going to give this talk to the whole department. And he was going, no, I can't give this talk. I never gave this talk before. I don't have a PhD yet. I'll wait till I get my PhD, then I will give a speech. I said, Nasser, I'm not asking you to give it. I'm telling you to give it. No, brother, can you change your mind? Please. So for a long time, he's pestering me not to put him forward to speak in public. But I realized how important it was to speak in public. So I forced him to speak in front of the department. And he gave his speech, and the head of department came to me and said, oh, I really enjoyed Nasser's talk. That was really good. And then a few months later, he gave a talk at a competition between Manchester University, Salford, UMIS in them days, and Manchester Metropolitan. And he came joint first in the competition between the universities. Previous to that, always Manchester or UMIS had won, but Nasser shared the first prize. Then he went to San Diego to give a talk, and he gave a research paper at this big conference, International Conference of Thin Films. And the most prestigious prize at that conference was the Bunsha Prize. And Nasser gave this talk, and by some miracle, he won the Bunsha Prize for the best paper in the whole conference, yeah. And several hundred people attend that conference. There's top speakers from all over the world. And then Nasser won the prize. So he built up his confidence slowly. And then I was invited somewhere to give a talk, and he said, no, let me give it. So we went from a very shy, shy kid to being, to winning a most prestigious prize for the conference in our specific area. So I don't know if he had a phobia, but he was certainly very intimidated by speaking in public in front of people. So many people have that, and like Rona said before, you can overcome this fear. I don't know if you want to add something, Nasser, about that experience.
Well, I think this webinar is not about me yet. So maybe we need to, if you can maybe continue.
Okay, so public speaking. So let me tell you, so I told you Nasser's story. Let me tell you my story. So as a kid, I was always chronically shy. So I never gave any speeches. Hello? So I never gave any speeches, never even read out a passage from the book yet. I always avoided speaking in class or reading anything. And if it was my turn, miraculously, I was sick and avoided it. Because I thought if I speak in public, I'm going to die. That was the phobia that I had. So throughout my school, throughout my secondary school, college and university, I never ever gave a single talk in front of a group of people. One-to-one I was always fine, but when there was 2 or 3 people, I couldn't do anything. So then I went to university and I picked a degree that did not have a final year project that I had to speak about. And I only picked it because there was no speech in that degree. I wasn't that interested in the degree. Then I did my PhD, again avoided public speaking completely. So then I went to work for a General Electric company, and we presented a research paper. And I thought we'll put a poster up, and then what I'd do is I put the poster up at the night, then I will disappear so that nobody asks me any questions. But the conference organizers asked my colleague Douglas to say, oh, this paper looks so interesting, can you come and give a presentation? And Douglas agreed to give it. And then I said to Douglas, okay, I'll prepare your slides, you can give the presentation. And then he said, no, not me give it, you give it. And I said to him, I've never given a presentation in my whole life. How can I give a presentation? He goes, no, it's about time you started, you're giving it. Then I made a fundamental decision that, either, I get out of this career completely or I give this public speech. And even if I died, I said, I'm going to give this public speech. So it was a conference, again, it was like a conference speech. And then I came across this book, and it was called The Silver Method, which is a method of meditation, creative visualization. So I was practicing the techniques in this book about, creative visualization. So I thought, I need to visualize myself giving an ideal speech. So one side I was planning to give an ideal speech. On the other side, I had this phobia that I was going to die. So every day I used to read Surah Yasin from the Holy Quran and say, oh Allah, I know I'm going to die, but let me read this Surah Yasin, and then after that, at least maybe I've got a chance of going to heaven, if I read this. So every day I used to do 2 things. I used to practice creative visualization, and I used to visualize myself giving this perfect speech. I used to practice my speech itself. And then I used to read the Holy Quran and say, oh, please Allah, make sure that I can go to heaven if I die. So I was doing these 3 things simultaneously. So I knew my speech by heart. I visualized myself performing in a confident manner and the audience being pleased with me. And at the end, and there was 500 scientists at that conference. I gave my talk, and people gave me, you know, a lot of applause. And the chairman said, "Oh, thank you for a very clear and interesting presentation." And I'm like feeling it. Oh Allah, I'm still alive. Yeah, I'm not dead yet. So. And then I had the confidence actually to answer all the questions very well. So I don't know what I said within the speech, but I had the confidence then to speak and answer the questions. Then I thought I need to repeat this experience again and again. Then I got invited to Cambridge University, and I thought, right, I'll accept the invitation, gave the talk. Then I went to some other universities, gave the talk. And then I had this belief system change from, if I speak, I'm going to die, to if I'm prepared, I can speak. So gradually, I overcame that fear by repeating the process again and again. So that's how I kind of overcame my phobia of public speaking. Do you want to add anything, Rona? Or?
Yeah. If you can take screen share off. I don't like speaking to a blank screen. Okay. Well, basically, that's more or less what I've just said, that it is a fear, it's a dreadful fear, but once you overcome it, it never comes back. And it's overcome relatively easily because it's not a real fear. You're not going to die, you know, but people actually, you're not the only one that was like that, Waqar. I've come across quite a few people who actually thought if they stood up and spoke in public, they would just drop dead. And it's a phobia, which means it's unrealistic. I mean, my background is psychology, but I didn't go on and do the whole academia thing. I stopped at the degree because I was much more interested in the practical side of things and getting to people face to face and helping them to overcome this fear of public speaking. And storytelling, believe it or not, is so effective, as Nasser could tell you, because he's done it so often. It's not that we are afraid of speaking, it's afraid we're going to be judged. That's what we don't like the idea of. And we think we're not going to come up to the mark. We think we're not going to be able to, you know, present anything, even just a conversation. But the reason we're like that, as I say, goes back to childhood, when we take on all of these layers. I mean, none of us is the person that we were born. We've all become something different over time. When we've become a parent, when we've become a grandparent or whatever, all of these complications in life attach themselves to us, and we no longer think of ourselves first. Some people do, but thankfully they're in the minority. Most of us have got so much going on in our mind about other people, and we forget who we are. So that's the first thing you have to do. I used to laugh at that saying, go and find yourself. I used to think, what does that mean, go and find yourself? We're not lost. What it actually means is find the real you that's in here. Because when you speak in public, that's where it's coming from. It's coming from just you and nothing else. So you get the attention that you didn't want in the first place. When you get it, it becomes addictive. And I'm sure now any chance that the professor gets to go and make a public speech, he'll jump at it. Am I right, Professor?
Yeah, now I get invited all over the world to...
Yes. And you would never think of saying no, would you?
No.
and when in the public speaking club, Nasser always, you know, wants to go up and do something. And it's such a difficult message to get across because the fear is so real. It's very difficult for me to try and convince you that you have nothing to fear, because it's the simplest thing in the world to overcome. It is the most horrible fear, but it is the simplest to overcome. And how I do this when I'm working with people and getting them to overcome this real fear, we go through a process, and it's a storytelling process. So we meet up and we share a story. Now, you're not asked to stand up and speak in public, but you know that you're going to be speaking. But you have to speak. You know, you wouldn't get through life if you didn't have something to say. And where we separate the fear and turn it into a love, because it does become, oh, let me do, like Nasser did, oh, let me do this one, I want to tell the story, oh, let me tell you this. Because once you get that confidence, there's so much in there that you're trying to get out, and this is the time to do it. So we have this, the first thing is, as I say, peel away all the layers and find the real you, your true voice. Like, for example, yesterday, I was several different people. I was mum, I was grandma, I was sister, I was cousin, I was customer on Amazon, I was customer on somewhere else. And every single time I'm having that conversation, I've got a different hat on. I even speak in a different way. Well, I don't now, because I have learned to use one voice and one voice only. But let me tell you the most incredible thing about learning to speak in public. Try not saying the word no. Just try to never, ever say the word no. I got a phone call from my daughter when my grandson was, the middle one was about 3 years old. Mum, you have been coaching my son. I said, what do you mean I've been coaching your son? She says, it's written all over him. I can hear him. This is his grandma talking. I went through to him and I said, right, come on, Max, it's time for bed. He didn't say no like he usually would. He said, I don't think so. She says, I knew right away that you have been teaching him not to say the word no. Now, why is the word no so effective? It's because it has an instant effect on the brain. It's not our mouth that does the talking. It's our brain. It's not our ears that do the listening. It's our brain. And when you can separate that and understand what's going on, just try it. Try to not say the word no. Instead say, let me think about that, or I don't think so, or are you sure? Just use another saying or phrase to stop yourself from saying the word no. And then try not to say the word yes, because we do this all the time and we don't even know we're doing it. And you'll see how powerful it is when you change the way that you speak just by that little fraction of a thing. So anyway, that's just another little bit about overcoming the fear of public speaking. It's very effective.
Yeah, but I was also told, yeah, that a bit of fear is good as well, you know, before you begin a speech, because if you don't have a bit of fear, you're not going to do a good job.
Yes, but in that case, it's not a fear of public speaking anymore. It's a fear of not getting it right, and that's a different thing entirely.
Okay, so can I go back to sharing my screen?
Sure.
So I learned about creative visualization from this book, yeah. And then there's, obviously this comes from a method called the Silver Method, which is being taught in over 60 different countries. It's got 20 million graduates, and it's also taught in top universities. And it's a process of dynamic meditation. So I won't go much into the history, and it's got certain techniques called mirror of the mind, 3 fingers techniques, and the mental screen. I said to you that I was practicing a creative visualization. So on my mental screen, I was seeing myself give this talk in a perfect manner, and the audience responding in a very positive way. So these are some of the techniques you learn in the Silver Method. And it can be used to overcome fear, solve problems, achieve goals, be more creative, and develop your memory. And so if I can ask you to think about a great public talk that you've seen, and think about what worked well and what didn't work well, and how did you feel as an audience member, and then you can think about a public talk that you've seen that didn't work well, and how did you feel as a, you know, so think about a good talk and think about a bad talk and analyze what happened. So if you want to learn something, any skill, you have to look at people who are very, very good at what they do. So you can see great public speeches in, if you listen to TED Talks, you will be able to see some really good speeches that move the audience. And there's also many bad speeches that you've probably heard or been to. And if you do the analysis of what worked well and what didn't work well, and try to incorporate into yourself things that work well, then you're going to improve yourself as a public speaker. So we all have what we call mirror neurons in our bodies. When we watch something, like children, when they watch their parents do something, they tend to just copy it. And that's the mirror neurons inside our brain. And what we do is we see something, we copy it. See something else, we copy it. So that's why youngsters are very influenced by personalities and pop stars and football players, because they want to be like that. So if you see a good public speech, then you want to model it and be like that. And if you see a bad one, you can see things that you can avoid. So you can do this exercise yourself. Think of a good one, think of a bad one, and see what you can do to improve yourself. Do you want to add anything, Rona?
Yeah, well, basically, becoming a public speaker, and not even necessarily becoming a public speaker, I don't mean that, just having enough confidence to speak in public. Whether you're talking in a meeting, a team meeting at work, or whether you're in front of an audience or just having a conversation. The reason why we fear speaking in public is because whatever we say, people are going to judge us on that, whether we like it or not. People are going to judge us by the way we speak to them. And I think that's why it causes so much anxiety. It's because you don't want to be judged and you think you're going to be. And this is why when it happens in childhood, it's so dreadful. Like has happened with Professor Ahmed. He's actually taken time off from school or university or wherever because he knew he was going to be asked to do a talk. You can't go through your life like that. It's just so miserable. And the way to overcome it, I mean, in my background, I have, in fact, recently, only a couple of months back, just before lockdown, I did a session of tutorials for university tutors who actually had lost their confidence in quite a way about dealing with their students because there was such a divide between their understanding of what was necessary in the workplace today. For some people, it's all about the technology. And you don't have to be a good public speaker because what you do with your technology will get you by. And that's fair enough until it comes the time when you have to say something. And then you're judged on that. So, but it's much more simple than that. It's being a confident adult. And becoming a confident adult starts with being able to communicate well. And if you can't communicate well, it will always hold you back. It will hold you back in every way, not just in work. It will hold you back in your private life. It will hold you back with your family life. Because if you can learn to communicate effectively with your children, your life is 1,000 times easier, believe me. And it's not so much about what we say, it's about how we say it. And if I could come back onto the screen, I want to show you something. Can I come back onto the screen? Yep. There I am. Okay. So I'm going to tell you something. This proves fundamentally that when you say something, depending on how you deliver that message, will depend on how it's received. There's a very famous quote that's used in this way, and it's actually an advert. And the advert says, "Baby's shoes for sale, never worn." How does that make you feel? If that makes you feel sad, can you raise your hand either electronically or using the chat thing? I think almost everybody's hand has gone up. Why? What word there made you think that that was a sad story? Because I'm going to tell you the same message again. Baby's shoes for sale, never worn. What message does that give you? They don't fit anymore. That was a waste of money. The first message made you think that that baby had died.
Yes.
The second message makes you think, oh, for goodness sake, that was a total waste of money. I used exactly the same words. I just presented them in a whole different way. And even now, I hear my kids coming at me and speaking to me, and I think, no, no, I'm getting bought in here. They're going to take me, you know, for whatever, because I can hear them doing what I taught them to do, manipulate me. And it's really frustrating, but I can't turn the clock back now. And I'm quite proud of them, actually, because, you know, they're excellent communicators. And once you learn how to use language, it's very powerful. So that's just a little snippet of how you can say something in a certain way and the message can be delivered entirely differently from how you meant it to be. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Perfect. Are you seeing my screen now?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, so next one is I just want to give you some tips on how to do a good public talk. And obviously many of my talks are with PowerPoints because I go to conferences and that kind of stuff. So obviously you need to be very positive and enthusiastic when you're speaking. And you need to be simple and clear. So there's no point talking and trying to use big, long, complicated words that the audience doesn't understand. You want to get your message across, and you can get that across by simplicity and clarity. And if you could use images instead of cluttering your slides with text, that's much better than just lots and lots of writing. So I've seen PowerPoint slides where right from top to bottom it's just filled with text. So when you're focusing on the text, you're not really listening to what the speaker is saying. So try to make it, you know, use images, because if you can paint a picture, it's worth 1,000 words. Then the other tips I want to give you is obviously the most powerful thing that you can do is get your message across through telling stories. And the technique that I've used is that I try to make a point or describe a principle. So even if you're giving a technical talk, then after you've done that, then you try to tell a compelling story that will illustrate the point or principle that you're trying to get across. And then reinforce that point and principle again so the audience gets what you're trying to say. So that's like a simple structure that I've used in most of my presentations that I've given, you know, wherever throughout the world. And then the other thing you want to do is, obviously we are very influenced by emotions. So if you can paint a picture that shows emotions, then you're much more likely to understand the presentation better and act in a way that you should be acting, or in a way that you want the other person to react. So emotion is very important. Rona, do you want to say something about stories and emotions and pictures?
Yes. There's a whole different thing that people don't always grasp when it comes to communication. And that is the difference between hearing and listening. It's two very different things. When you hear something, you're hearing the words, but you're not necessarily processing them. Whereas when you listen, you will process that information. And how do you know when the person you're speaking to is listening or hearing? Well, it's quite easy because it shows on their face. When somebody's listening to you, they'll be intent, and you will see that, you will make that connection. So there's no point in having the most fantastic presentation to put forward to somebody if they're not hearing and listening effectively. So, and there's there's a few little tricks, if you like, that you can use to make sure that people are listening to you. Just like I showed you with how you can change how people hear what you say by the way you say it, you can also change what people hear by the way you say it. And those are very simple techniques that you learn. And again, we're talking the same language here. You know, Professor Ahmed and myself, and Dr. Ali, we're all talking exactly the same language. This is a science. Communication is a science. And it's not something that you're born able to do. It's learned behavior. And it doesn't matter when you start learning. It'll still be just as effective. If you learn when you're 5 or if you learn when you're 55, it's every bit as effective, but it's life-changing. Once you can become a more confident communicator, your life changes in every way. You become a more confident person because that's natural. It's natural to become more confident when you feel more able. And those things, as I say, there's lots of techniques that you can do. And the MIND program is one of them. And the one that I use basically is storytelling, because it goes through every single one of those stages that we've spoken about today. And it's also interesting and can be quite fun. So, you know, you have options when you want to learn, you know, to be a more effective public speaker. You have options, but I would say to every single person who's in this webinar right now, if you have a fear of public speaking, it's holding you back. So this is your opportunity to do something about it. And you wouldn't be here if you didn't want change. So I urge you to take that next step and do something about it.
Thank you.
So you got another slide to show?
Yes, I've got a few more slides. Can you see my slides now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think although, you know, many people can speak, it looks like they're speaking spontaneously and they haven't done any preparation. I can tell you preparation is the key to success in public speaking. So if I'm prepared, I'm a lot more confident when I give my talks. I remember my own professor, he had to give a 5-minute talk at the opening of a conference. And I was trying to find him, and he was at the venue and he was practicing his opening again and again and again and again. And I've always felt that he was a natural speaker. But then I realized that the reason he's so good is that he really, really prepares for his presentations. So when he gave the talk at the conference, it seemed very spontaneous. It seemed like it came just off the cuff without any preparation. But he had prepared again and again to appear natural and to be good at what he was doing. So I think preparation is the key. And then if you can prepare and then you can practice, or you can create a plan or a structure with a beginning, middle, and an end, and all stories have some kind of a structure as well. And then you have to know who the audience is, how old they are, what their interests are, what their expertise is, and what their level of language is. And then you need to practice, either record it with the iPhone or with your computer, or practice it with somebody. So you need to plan, know the audience, and you need to practice. So I remember giving a speech at, I was invited to give a speech at Engineers Island Christmas dinner. And again, it was a technical speech, and I tailored it for experts in that particular field. So it was their Christmas dinner, and I spoke about nano manufacturing, and I virtually got a standing ovation and so much interest throughout the Christmas dinner about, you know, all this new nanotechnology, nano manufacturing. And then I gave the same talk to a group of first-year students at the university. And at the end of the lecture, they simply walked out. I didn't get hardly any response whatsoever. So then I thought, how come my delivery would have been the same? My slides were certainly the same. Why did I get 2 different responses? And when I looked at it, I thought, well, the presentation was actually tailored for expert engineers, and they really appreciated what I was saying, and it wasn't really geared for this audience here. So I needed to do something completely different for this particular audience. If you don't know your audience well, their level of expertise, their interests, it's very difficult to get your point across. So you need to know your subject, and you need to know your audience, and you need to be clear in what you're saying. Then I think it's very important, obviously, once you understand it, to rehearse and so there's this thing called deliberate practice. I don't know if you've heard of it, where so a lot of athletes, they do deliberate practice. So what they do is, so there's one of my favorite people was Bruce Lee, the martial artist, and he said, I don't fear a person who knows 1,000 punches, but I fear a person who has practiced one punch 1,000 times. So that kind of hammered home to me about this practice or trying to master something. So if you're going to give a talk, you have to practice again and again and again and again, analyze and reflect, and then do it again, analyze and reflect, do it again, get feedback. And that's a practice known as deliberate practice. And all the elite sports people, they all practice this deliberate practice. So for example, in tennis, you'll get Djokovic or Federer, and they'll just practice thousands and thousands of forehands or thousands and thousands of backhands until they master it and get to the next level. So I think public speaking is also like that. You need to practice and analyze and practice and analyze to get better and better. The other thing I wanted to say is we think, you know, the most important things is the words that we say. Now, I'm not saying words aren't important, but people have done some studies and they found out that words only account for 7% of communication. But your voice tone, your modulation, the pauses, the way you say the words, they represent around about 38% of human communication. And your body language, your facial expressions, your arms, and that represents 55% of human communication. So I'm not saying words aren't important, but you have the way you say the words, how you express yourself is more than just the words that you say. And Rona, do you want to add anything to what I've said in the last few slides?
Yeah, please. I would say, yeah.
One thing, I think Professor Ahmed did ask me to sort of come in when he was talking about my story while I was a PhD student. And what he's just talking about here now, the body language and eye contact. Now, I remember at the time when I had to give my first talk, I was chronically shy. I wasn't experienced. I didn't want to do it. But one of the things what I did, which I was told by Professor Ahmed, is that go around, look at other professors and see how they give their presentations. You know, what's their body language, how they speak, how they present, look at their slides and that. And that's what I did. So I was looking at other people's. Obviously, every speaker has their own style. So you look at others, and then ultimately you develop your own style. So it's good to sort of look at, if you're a beginner, to look at other professional speakers and see how they do it, how they speak, and then build your own style.
Yeah. Very interesting. Rona, do you want to add something?
Yes, I do agree with most of that. I don't agree with all of it entirely, because I think that specifically is to do with what you do, the kind of work that you do and the presentations that you make. I would say that that was very much a part of that. However, when it comes to general everyday life and being an effective communicator, the words can be very, very important. But everything else has to be in line. If we take ourselves back to the time when there was no language as we know it, you know, when men walked about with clubs in their hand and dragged their women by the hair behind them, there was no language. And language has evolved because we are human and because we are able to relate to each other in that way. Now, whether or not we like it, we make an instant impression on people. And that instant impression has often got nothing to do with what we say, because it's often before we've even spoken a word. So it's right in that regard that, you know, you're judged almost immediately. And the way to deflect from that is to always have the same approach, the same stance. As I say, my voice now, I use the same voice every time. Whether I'm talking to my doctor, my lawyer, my grandchild, I'll soften slightly for my grandchild, but other than that, that's because my voice is me. I found that voice when I was about 40 years old and had gone through a very, very difficult time in my life. And I heard myself say some things and it didn't sound like me. It sounded like this frantic woman, you know, just about to lose the plot because I was scared, I was worried, something was happening. And that went on for a while. And when I realized afterwards, I thought nobody was listening to a word I said. And the reason they weren't listening to me was because of the way I was speaking. So I learned to use a controlled level of speech that I use all the time. And Dr. Ali has known me for many, many years now, and he'll tell you that that's true. My voice never changes, my tone never changes. I modulate. If I'm telling a story, I will rise and fall with a lilt when I'm telling a story. But that's an important key factor, is your voice. It has to sound warm, inviting, no threat behind it. And even if I'm delivering a very powerful message, even if I'm giving somebody a severe telling off, my voice doesn't change. Because I don't want that to change. I want the message to be clear. And that's another key to being a professional public speaker, is that you always have the same approach, you always have the same sound. It's almost like a pattern. It's almost like, you know, and you'll find the same doing your scientific research. If you're looking for a specific thing, you might have to do it 50 or 100 or 1,000 times before you get it right. And practice is absolutely vital. So even when you do become a proficient public speaker, you still have to practice about what you're going to say. And storytelling helps wonderfully with that, because you can build your confidence through storytelling, because nobody knows what you're going to say. So it doesn't matter if you suddenly freeze mid-story and can't remember what comes next. Just make it up. Just say something out of your head. Because nobody knows, the audience don't know what you're going to say next, but the audience is key. And you have to know that you have the audience on side before you start. And that's just another facet of becoming a proficient public speaker. But what we're talking about now is not going to that level. It's starting at the very base level of being, you know, confident enough to just stand up and open your mouth. And that's really the difficult part for most people who have this fear. So we overcome that first, and then we go on to how do you become a really good public speaker? How do you do a TED Talk? The last TED Talk I did at Manchester University, a bunch of kids, youngsters, in their late teens and early 20s. And I thought, I've got to talk to something that's about something that's interesting to them. So I had to do a little bit of research for that. And I spoke about drugs, which went down very well, I have to say, because it's something that they're all interested in. And thankfully, a lot of them are interested in it because they can see that that's the key to making this world a better place, is to have this world without drugs. And that's what my talk was about. So you just have to find the topic that you know is going to interest your subjects, if you like. That's when it's not doing the kind of thing that these guys do, because that's a pure science and that's a deliberate topic, which is a bit, I think, probably more difficult in some ways, but in other ways, you know exactly what you're talking about, so you can make your speech so much more interesting.
Rona, I think that the point that you made about being authentic is very important. I remember early on in my career, I was trying to model people, so I thought I need to speak like people like Cambridge and Oxford do. So I tried to change my accent and the way I was expressing myself. And then I realized, why am I putting all this effort into trying to become like something else? And I phoned up one of my friends who was a professor at Oxford 10 years after I first worked with him. And I said, good morning, John. Do you remember me? And he goes, oh, who can forget that accent? And I grew up in Salford, and I've got a Salfordian accent. And basically, I was trying to lose it, or it's like losing your identity. Mm-hmm. When I went back to my Salford accent, I realized I had far more impact than if I was trying to be somebody else with a different accent, different way of speaking. So I think your point about being authentic and being yourself is very important, and we tend to kind of sometimes try to lose that.
Well, that's because the only time you can be truly comfortable is when you are yourself. It's very difficult to get that sense of comfort when you're trying to be something else or somebody else. My daughter went to 11 different primary schools, God bless her, because we moved about so much with work when she was young. This is my youngest daughter. And she ended up going to Oxford. And when she went to Oxford, she had lived in Scotland, Wales, Cheshire, you know, she'd been all over the place, and she'd picked up all these little bits of accents as teenagers do. And when she went to Oxford, the advice that she got from her older brother-in-law was, use your Scottish accent because it's you and it's real. And she says, oh, my mum tells me that, but I like speaking like this and da-da-da-da-da-da. And she started speaking with her Scottish accent, and she's never looked back. She's now a young barrister in Manchester, and everybody remembers her because, you know, the one with the Scottish accent. Not just the one that's very, very good, but the one with the Scottish accent. Because if you're real and be yourself, it's much, much more effective and will make you, in the end, a more comfortable public speaker.
Okay, so let's get back to my slides again.
It is 3 o'clock as well, so maybe we need to try
Let me just say, fly through these slides. Then obviously we spoke. So obviously one of the things that if you're public speaking is people get nervous at the beginning. So basically, some of the things that you can learn to relax yourself is obviously deep breathing, relaxing your body, visualizing your ideal place of relaxation. So if you can relax before you speak in public, I think you're going to be more effective. Secondly, I've seen PowerPoint slides with hundreds and hundreds of different text. And if the slides are cluttered, it's hard to get your message across. I've seen people, I went to a lecture where somebody had just one picture and he just got this speech and he just read through it word for word for half an hour. And it might have been very important, but I think the audience was quite disengaged with it. So basically, I think Nasser is asking us to wrap up now because we've done an hour. So I think, you know, everybody has this fear of public speaking, or that sense of nervousness and tension. So now that I've given hundreds of talks, maybe thousands, I still get nerves at the beginning of every talk. And I think it's your body's way of preparing to give a performance. And I don't think it goes away completely. And you have to kind of, if you've got your fears, the best way of overcoming your fear is to face it and just do that. And if you keep doing it, keep doing the actions, then that fear will not have that hold on you. And a lot of people, so fear and excitement are this kind of have similar bodily feelings. So I remember somebody telling me a story that they asked Bruce Springsteen, you know, how do you feel when you go on stage? And he says, oh, my heart starts beating faster, I start sweating, I know I'm ready, I'm excited. And they asked somebody else, and they said, oh, I start sweating, I do this, and I think I'm going to die because my heart keeps pumping so fast. So both excitement and fear have got similar physical stimulation. So if you can relabel the fear as excitement, I think it mentally will help you to get over the fear of public speaking, because you'll think, oh, I'm excited about this, I want to do this. And then if you prepare thoroughly, and a lot of the times, you know, you think, well, maybe I'm not good enough, maybe I don't know enough about the subject. What if somebody asks me questions I don't know? So you feel that you're not enough, so you need to be more positive and think, well, I can do this, I'm going to have an impact, I'm going to change lives, I'm going to make a difference. So I think you have to be positive.
Okay.
I don't know, Rona, do you want to add something?
Yeah, maybe I think what we could do is, I know this can go on for a lot longer, And I think in the future, we do have plans to actually do more webinars, and not just webinars, but also maybe a program